that he only predicted that President Donald Trump would be president, and that was only 18 months before he ran. Just as he said, I'm going to run, the rabbi said he's going to win. And the more they mitcha him, the more votes he's going to get. And yes, Rabbi Kessin will be taking questions at the end, but he asks the questions be confined to Inyei Torah, and please, not about Mifal HaPayis. Actually, those who know Rabbi Kessin will tell you right away that he really is not about predictions or miracles or magic. He's an Adam Gadol who has been moxie everyone in this generation in detail of the meaning of Lashon Hara, and he's promoted Torah Hashkafa around the world. Very few people know that he brought about also the Ramchal to make it a public view available for all of us. I know a bit more about him going way back when I was studying at YU. And he was at MTJ, and he got some from Reb Moshe Zal, and it's a pleasure to be here with him. What happened was, we didn't have, in those ancient days, official Sunday learning. You know, it's like, you could be Goyish on Sunday. But some of us wanted to learn. So I came down to MTJ and I was learning. I had a chavrusa. And after the chavrusa, I was sitting and I saw the rabbi, and I said, Rabbi, can I ask you a question to explain something to me? And we talked for a few minutes, and he said, Maish, if you're going to come every Sunday, I'll learn with you. Now, you know, most of us judge Talmidei Chachamim by what they know, but not necessarily about their midas. I could say the rabbi is a huge Talmid Chacham. He has tremendous midas. He loves people. He's there for all of us. And I welcome you tonight.
Thank you. Is this on? I got it. I'm going to start this year. I hope everybody hears me.
Closer to you. Or move the chair up in one of the other.
I'm going to start this year with a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvaroi. Amen. It's a privilege it's an honor to be able to speak here. First of all, my name is Rabbi Mendel Kessin, and I just want to say a couple of things before I begin. There's an alarm that goes off at midnight. In any case, what I want to speak about tonight is a very interesting topic. First of all, it is an abbreviated version of a much longer shiur. The shiur is on my website. It's called TorahThinking.com. Actually, it's on YouTube and it's on other places. And it's really, like I say, it's a condensed version. So far, the original shiur is 15 videos, which is 25 hours. And this shiur is obviously going to be much less. But if you want to see an abbreviated version that's longer than this, it's also on YouTube. What I want to try to do here, my objective, is the following. We walk around today, many of us, with a tremendous what's called chalisha of emunah. We walk around with a tremendous diminishment of faith and bitochen. We don't understand what's going on. We are surrounded by anti-Semites. We are surrounded by anti-Semites all over. We are surrounded by things that make no sense, especially in the last 100 years. Therefore, what I want to demonstrate in this year, and that's really the purpose of this, is to show you the hand of God. The greatest way to have emunah and bitochen, especially today, is to understand that the Rebbeinu Shem has not abandoned Klal Yisrael. On the contrary, He is leading us to a tremendous geula, a redemption. The only thing is that He conceals it for many reasons. But what the Rebbeinu Shem really is doing is that He is going to bring the geula, the redemption. One of the greatest ways to have a chizik emunah is to see this and to realize that the Rebbeinu Shem loves us. He's our Father, He's our King, and He will not abandon us. And it doesn't make a difference what you see all around you. It's all part of the process called the Messianic process. And that's what I want to try to demonstrate tonight. Also, I want to mention a disclaimer. I am not a prophet. I like prophets. But I am not a prophet. What I tell you now is based on over 50 years of immersion in Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto's work. And that's really what you're going to hear tonight. And therefore, when one does that, you are able to see things that obviously most people cannot see. And your framework of looking at the world is a whole different framework. I do not get the news from the New York Times or the Jerusalem Post or whatever calls themselves newspapers. It's a matter of understanding what the divine plan is. Now, due to the amount of time, obviously there are many things there's an enormous amount of details that I have to leave out. But I do want to give you a flavor about what's going on. And I do want to show you the hand of God. And you'll see it. Because what is happening around us is in many ways spectacular. However, before I start that, I do have to talk a little about the divine plan itself. Just as an introduction, you have to have some feel about what the Rebbeinu Shalom, what God is doing, and why. So let me start off with that. What's important to know is that Jews have a task. What is the task? What the Moshe did in a very simple way is he emits certain forces. In Kabbalah they're called spheres, but fundamentally they are spiritual forces. That's really what you have to know. And what the Moshe does with these spiritual forces, he emits them. And these forces create different realities. A reality, a metzius. And he creates 5 of them. The lowest reality that God creates is called the physical world. And the reason why he created the physical world is that he wants to give mankind a task. What is that task? That task is to bring down the spiritual into a physical. What does that mean? That means he creates the world that's physical, and the physical world is a barrier to experiencing God. That's the barrier. So what the Moshe wants is that mankind, and now today specifically Jews, should retransform a physical universe into a spiritual. And that is called zikuch, to purify the world, physical into spiritual. That is why if you ask, where is Olam Haba? The answer is Olam Haba is here, except it's physical. What the Moshe wants everybody is to retransform the physical universe into a spiritual. And that is called zikuch of the Olam. It's a retransformation of Olam Hazeh, ultimately into the future world called Olam Haba. Second idea, well, how do we do it? How does mankind, specifically the Jewish people, how do they retransform a physical world into a spiritual? The answer to that is there are certain what's called tikkun devices. Tikkun simply means to rectify, to change, to restore. What the Moshe wants is us to restore the physical universe back into the original form, which is called spiritual. And that is called tikkun. How do you do the tikkun but? And the answer is that the Moshe gave us certain devices. First device is called mitzvahs. What a mitzvah really does, and I'm not going to go into how and why, but what a mitzvah does, it actually begins to reverse the physicality of the universe into a spiritual domain. The only thing is that we don't see it because of the sin of Adam Harishon, and that complicated matters. But fundamentally what happens is that the world is slowly retransformed. And at the time, especially after the Mashiach, it will be completely retransformed, and the physical universe will become Olam Haba. And that is something which is incomprehensible. But this basically, mitzvahs is the way to do it. The second idea, the Rebbe knew that Jews are not going to do mitzvahs. There are going to be total periods of time that the Jews will unfortunately abandon the Torah throughout the history of Jews, of course. So the Rebbe therefore decided to give a second device that can also retransform. What is that device? That device is called tshuva. Although tshuva is a mitzvah, it's not like every mitzvah that we know of. Tshuva, what it does is it corrects, rectifies a sin. And therefore, what tshuva does is if a person sins, it turns the sin back into a mitzvah, and as a result of that, the tikkun happens also through tshuva. But the Rebbe Shem knew that Jews are not going to do tshuva. Many times they won't do tshuva, or it's half-hearted attempt, and so on. I mean, think about it. After Yom Kippur, you know how quick that Ma'ariv is, the quickest Ma'ariv of all the entire year. So the question is, what happens if they don't do tshuva? Then what happens? So the answer is that the Moshe gave a third tikkun device, and that's really what it is. That tikkun device is called yisurin, or suffering. There are many forms of suffering. There's persecution on a national level, there's exile, and on a personal level, there is bankruptcies, there's divorces, there's health problems, all kinds of things. But whether it be on a personal level or a national level, yisurin is a rectifying device. It's not punishment per se. What it does is it undoes what a chet does for the person, without getting into the details. In any case, so there are three devices which the Rebbe uses to rectify the creation. Now, there's a third idea that you need to know. The third idea is this, is that if a Jew does a mitzvah, what happens? Well, he brings down this tremendous kedusha. It's called the awe of the spheres. He brings it down to the physical world. Fine. But what happens when a Jew sins? He doesn't bring down anything. That's what we would think. But the answer is no, he does. Because the consequences of man's behavior must end in some type of repercussion. However, this tremendous force or kedusha or holiness that comes down doesn't go to the Jews. It goes to an angel called a Sutan. The Sutan is an angel that's assigned 3 jobs. His first job is to tempt man. Yetzer hara, that's what we call him. His second job is that if a person does sin, and in other words that the temptation is successful, then what the Sutan does is that he prosecutes that person. He's called the great Makatre. Kitrut means prosecution. He becomes the heavenly district attorney. That's really what he is. And if that person is found guilty in the Bezdin, so what happens then is that he becomes the executioner. Doesn't mean he kills, but it does mean that he carries out the sentence. 3 jobs for that malach. That's what he's assigned. But the real idea is that the Sutan takes from the kedusha of the Jew that he would have gotten had he done the mitzvah. He didn't do the mitzvah. He did the sin. So the Sutan takes from that kedusha, and it's called yonek. He nourishes off that chet. That's how he survives. You see, it's a very important concept. There's no such thing as the acts of a Jew inconsequential. It always does something. Either it brings down kedusha, or it gives kedusha, holiness, to the Sutan, and he's yonek. And as a result of that, he's able to do terrible things. Specifically, he's able to marshal the forces of the Umas Ha'olam, the nations of the world, And that's where the whole concept of Golus begins, and persecutions, and all the terrible things that Jews have experienced over the thousands of years of their history. Therefore, that's a basic understanding, is that we share the Kedusha. The problem in that scenario is that there's only a certain amount of Kedusha that comes down. And the problem is, if the Jews get it, if they do the mitzvah, they get it, so then the Jews survive, they flourish, become more spiritual, tremendous parnosa. But if the Jew, and what happens to the Sutan? Well, all the Kedusha is coming to the Jew. The problem is that if the Jew, and therefore the Sutan will grow weak and diminish. It actually diminishes. If all the Jews do all the mitzvahs, then the Sutan dies. Literally, he dies because he has no ability to survive on his own. If, however, the Jew sins, if the Jews sin, then the Sutan is yoinek from that Kedusha. And he survives, and he flourishes, and he grows incredibly strong. The Jew weakens spiritually, physically, in many different ways. This balance between we and the Sutan goes on for thousands of years. And there's a great amount of details, obviously, that I'm leaving out. But this is responsible for an incredible amount of history, of Jewish history and world history, as you will shortly see. Because you need to understand this concept. Now, if the Jews sin, we know that they go into a tikkun device called Yisurin. Mitzvahs aren't enough to do the tikkun, to rectify the world. Tshuva isn't enough. So therefore the Rosh makes a decision that the primary vehicle or agent or device that the Rosh is going to use is Yisurin. And this has been true for the last 2,000 years. We have been in exile for 2,000 years. That's a long time. The reason for that is because God has decided that we do not do sufficient mitzvahs and tshuva to warrant using only mitzvahs and tshuva as the only tikkun device. What the Baruch has decided actually is he actually wants to use, he has to, Yisurin, to complete the process. And therefore we find ourselves in Golus for 2,000 years. But remember, Golus is it's not retribution. We're not talking about punishment here. We are talking about tikkun. You want to call that rehabilitation? That's fine. But that's essentially really what goes on, is this whole concept. Now the interesting thing about that is, well, what is the difference between the three devices? Mitzvahs, tshuva, and yisurin. Commandments, repentance, and suffering. There's a big difference between them. Mitzvahs does the tikkun directly. It's the best way to do it. However, if a Jew sins, then the Jew gives over to the Sutan that incredible holiness that he would have gotten, and which he doesn't get because he sinned. He gives that over to the angel called the Sutan, you see. But the question is, wait a minute. If we're giving him all that food, so to speak, how do we get it back? We need to get it back. Because the Jew, therefore, has been assigned to two jobs. One is to take back all the stuff that he gave to the Sutan, you see. You got to take it back. You can't leave it in his hands. And the second thing is, once you take that back, then you have to bring down the rest of the Kedusha, you see. So in many ways, there's a twofold job. To take back which we gave the Sutan through our sins, right? And then to bring down the rest of it, and with both we retransform this existence into a physical. So the question is how? And the answer is, when you do tshuva, when you repent, then you take back the force of the Sutan back into our camp, what's called the Sitva de Kedusha, back to us, you see. And when the Jew suffers, he also takes back this Kedusha back into our hands, you see. So in all three devices, in some way we will be able to take everything back through the Golus and everything, and therefore do the zikuch of the Bria, the tikkun of the Bria, which is to bring God back, and therefore the physical universe is no longer an impediment to experiencing a Shekhinah. This is a simple, brief synopsis of what is going on, which is very, very important. I might add also, because of this fact that we have two concepts, to take back Kedusha from the Sutan. and the second job is to bring down the rest. That's why we have two Mashiachs, for those who are not familiar. There's a Mashiach ben Yosef. His job, he's at the forefront of bringing down the Kedusha. That's what his job is. And the Mashiach ben David takes it down. So the Mashiach ben Yosef is at the forefront of what's called Tahara, to take it out of the hands of the Sultan into the camp of the Jews. And then once that happens, then the Mashiach ben David comes and he brings down the rest. You see? That's why there are two Messiahs, two Mashiachs. Now, the first one to come, obviously, is going to be Mashiach ben Yosef. And that's really what we're looking forward to. And he will do battle, so to speak, with the nations of the world. In any case, that's why we have, this is a setup of what is supposed to take place. And all this, of course, is theoretical. But you have to see how this all plays out now in the 21st century. Because what I want to illustrate is what is happening now. And you can actually see the hand of God. What the Rabbi Hashem is doing is awesome under everybody's nose. That's what's happening. If in fact the Jews sin, and therefore they need Yisurin, suffering, as part of their tikkun, then the Rabbi Hashem has assigned only 8 nations that can do the job. That's it. Basically, there are 8 nations that are assigned this task. That if the Jews are designated to suffer, there's only 8 nations that can do this. And the advantage of that is that each nation that does make the Jews suffer, they will arise in status as a world power. Because the Moshe will not suffer the indignity of his people. He's not going to send us in Golos to Zimbabwe, right? So now that we have to suffer from the Zimbabweans, right? But Zimbabwe, come on, give me a break, right? He won't do that. So before he brings the Jews into a nation in which they have to suffer, at whatever level, he's going to make that nation into a great nation, a world power. Therefore, there are only 8 nations that can achieve this status. If you look at it that way, of being a world power, right? And they are the only nations that are designated that if the Jews need suffering, they will be the nations. Who are they? And this is pivotal in Jewish history. And obviously there's a great deal to understand about who these nations are, but they clearly form what's called a fabric of the history of the Jewish people. One, the first nation is Egypt, Mitzrayim. Everybody knows about Mitzrayim, of course. It's in the Torah. This is the first nation. And they were assigned that task. And Egypt, we know, of course, is a world power. It's the greatest nation on earth for 3,000 years. It's a very long empire. In any case, that's the first nation. The second nation is Babylon, Bavel. And they were a world power under Nebuchadnezzar. The third nation is Porus, Persia, today's Iran. And of course, they were under Achashverosh with Haman. The next nation is Yovan, Greece. And Greece, of course, was a world power under Alexander. The next nation after that is Edom, Esau, Rome. The Torah says that Esau, who is Esau? Esau zu Edom. Esau is Edom, whatever that means, whatever nation that is. Edom, the Gemara says, Edom zu Roimi. Edom is Rome, you see. But what the Russian did is very interesting. If we know that nations are designated to allow the Jews to have a kapara, so to speak, so therefore the Jews have to suffer. So if Rome is the 5th nation that will subjugate the Jews, that means Rome will be a power until Mashiach. Because you need Rome to subjugate the Jews, to make them suffer, you see? But the Russian didn't want that. He doesn't want one of these nations to remain for thousands of years. So what the Russian did is very interesting. He transformed Rome into a religion. And that religion can go all around the earth. And therefore, if the Jews are a nation that observes that religion, that's called Rome. So who did Rome become? Rome became Christianity. You know, if you've ever been to the Vatican, you know, there's Vatican museums and so on. They have all kinds of Roman statues there. Because Christianity is the heir of Rome. That's really who they are, you see. So Christianity is Rome. In fact, what is interesting, if you ask yourself, where's the seat of Christianity today? And the answer is in Italy, it's in Rome, right? And what is it called? It's called the Vatican. Well, if you write down the word Vatican in Hebrew, Vatikan, and you jumble the letters, it spells out Tikkun. Because the essential Tikkun of Christianity, they were the greatest of all the Tikkun devices. As we see by Yaakov and Esau, that Yaakov saw Esau by the ladder going up and not stopping. So Rome, which is Christianity, is the greatest of the nations, and they of course are world powers. But who's Rome, who's Christianity today? And the answer is Western civilization. So therefore the Jews have been subjugated by Western civilization primarily, and that is Rome, which is Esau and Edom, and so on. Okay, so how many did I list? For those who are awake.
5.
5, oh good. So I'm missing how many? 3. Right? Okay. Who are these 3? And these 3 really become powerful in the end. That's their time. Who are the 3? Okay, the first one is called Ishmael, the Arabs, Muslims. Ishmael is one of the nations that persecute the Jews. The next one is called Amalek. Amalek is a nation that disappeared a long time ago, but it's not so much the national identity that's important, it's the nature of Amalek. And Amalek are, the nature of Amalek primarily, they're megalomaniacs, incredible egos, where they want to supplant God. And we could begin to think in the last 50 years who that was. There's a whole shir about that. Fundamentally, Germany is Amalek, without getting into the whole thing. And Hitler, Yamach Shemayim, is really Gilgal in many ways of Haman. I won't get into that. But anyway, and all his 10 ministers were the sons of Haman, and so on. But in any case, so that's the second of the last 3. And the third one, which is interesting, is the Erev Rav. Now the Erev Rav is not a nation, it's Jews. In the Novi it predicts that. It says that what? It says that the Erev Rav, the Novi says, from within you will come your enemies. Who's within you? That's the concept of the Erev Rav. Who is the Erev Rav? And what's the origin of the Erev Rav? The origin of the Erev Rav is really by Yaakov and Esau. When Yaakov was about to meet Esau, he says something in Vayishlach. So he says over there that he was about to meet him, and it says, Vayira Yaakov ma'oid, and Yaakov feared greatly. Why? In any case, what he did is he offered a prayer to the Rebbeinu Shalom, and he said the following: Hatzileni no, save me, miyad ochi miyad Esau. Save me from my brother and from Esau. Now we know Esau is the brother of Yaakov, so why does he have to say save me from Esau and from my brother Esau? We know he's his brother. So what Yaakov is really saying is save me when Esau comes in one of 2 forms. If he comes as Esau, so I recognize him as an enemy, fine, then save me. But if he comes as Ochi, my brother, right? Hey, we're Jewish, I care about you. But his whole objective is to rip up the agreement that you have with God, which is that we are bonded to the Torah. That is our agreement with God. And he wants to rip up the supremacy of Torah, that it is that which we are, that is the agreement between us and God. That's what the Erev Rav wants, you see. They want to destroy the unique bond or agreement that Klal Yisrael has with the Rebbeinu Shalom, and that is the Torah. And they want to supplant it with what? Well, of course the Bible is great literature. So is Shakespeare, you see. And of course, gefilte fish. Jews have an incredible culinary, selection. You know, if you're into knedel, or whatever you're into, right? Jews, they want to supplant the religion, the spirituality of Judaism with what's called the culture. And they want to resemble the nations of the world. This is the Erev Rav. It's important to understand who are the Erev Rav. Well, in America, it's the Reform movement, the conservatives, and the Reconstructionists. And they have destroyed Judaism in America. And now they wish to do this, obviously, in Israel. and so on. That is the Erev Rav. In Israel, the Erev Rav are the secular Zionists, not the religious Zionists, but the secular Zionists. But in any case, that's important to understand. A Jew that sins is not an Erev Rav. He's just a Jew that sins. An Erev Rav is a leader that wants to lead the Jewish people astray. So his enemy is not the Jews, it's Judaism. That's what he wants to destroy. And when he wants to abandon God and the Torah and force others to abandon, he is a classic Erev Rav. In any case. And why is the Erev Rav so dangerous? Because it's like a tumor, a cancer. Why is a cancer so successful? Because a cancer is really a cell, a normal cell that has gone awry, that doesn't stop multiplying. And therefore the body does not recognize it as a foreign agent, as a pathological agent, because it's self. That's why cancer many times, unfortunately, is successful, because the immune system does not see it as a foreign invader. It's self. It's self that has what? That has gone awry and is now killing the person. That's what an Erev Rav is. The problem is that the Erev Rav, since they're Jewish, and they come across that, we're not against Jews, you see, therefore they resemble a cancer cell. They're a tumor, where the Jews do not recognize them as the enemy. It's a very important concept. In any case, that's what the Erev Rav is. They are the last. Now, just to step back for a minute, I had mentioned that Esau is Edom. Edom, the Gemara says, is Rome. Rome is Christianity, because God changed Rome into a religion. And Christianity is Western civilization. However, if you take a look at Western civilization, there's something very interesting. If you look at Esau had three characteristics. If you notice in the Torah, the first characteristic, he was an incredible Bagaiva. Vayives Esau es habechora. And Esau despised the firstborn right. That's incredible arrogance, because he just rejected spirituality out of hand. The second characteristic of Esau is Mirma, a fraud. He's an imposter. That's a second thing. You see, he's always hiding. The third aspect of Esau is Taiva. He was incredibly into materialism. Three aspects of Esau. Therefore, it's interesting, if you look at Western civilization is also divided into three. The first aspect of Esau, which is the megalomania, the gaiva, is who? It's Russia. Russia under communism. Because communism was atheistic, you see. And that is so dangerous, actually, that God only allowed them to remain communist 70 years. But because Russia is really Christian, it's the Russian Orthodox Church. But for those 70 years, Russia became incredibly atheistic. That's the gaiva, the arrogance of Esau. Who is the fraud of Esau, the mirma, the fraud? That's Europe. Europeans are frauds. They preach brotherly love, right? In their New Testament, what does it say? Turn the other cheek. But they fail to tell you that it's your cheek that they're going to turn. You see, that's what they fail to tell you. And that's really who they are. The Europeans are frauds. More people have been killed in the name of their guy than all wars put together. Can't believe what these guys have done to mankind. And this is the religion of what? Of love and peace. Anyway, I don't get started on that. The third aspect of Esau is the taiva, pleasure, right? Materialism, pleasure. Who is that? America. America is the pleasure capital, I would say capital of the world, but America is Esau, right? It's Catholicism and so on, or whatever, Protestants and so on, right? But America is a different place. America is a country that is into pleasure, you know? Of course, if you want to discuss philosophy, they'll talk to you about it, but it's got to be over a beer and a steak, you see, or else don't bother me. And not only that, what's interesting about America is the Tov Sheba Esau. It's the best part of Esau. You see, if you remember, Esau had one mitzvah that he incredibly observed. It was phenomenal, that mitzvah. Keep it over aim, right? Who's the only nation that had Mother's Day and Father's Day? It's America. Because that's what they're into, you see. So you have the three parts of Esau as represented by the three parts of Western civilization. And this is really, in many ways, is a very, very important idea. So these are the 8 nations that are assigned a task that if the Jews need persecution, this is what's going to happen. One more thing. The Gemara says that this world will last 6,000 years. Why? Because the world was created in 6 days, and in the 7th day is Shabbos, and God ceased from doing malacha. So therefore, the Gemara says that this will last 6,000 years, obviously 1,000 years for every 1 day of creation, you see. Now that calendar is a very interesting calendar, because one of the most significant time, although there are others, if you take a look at Friday, which 5 days have passed, and now it's Friday. Friday is Erev Shabbos. Erev Shabbos is when you begin to prepare for Shabbos. Therefore, Friday on the creation calendar is a very important day. In Friday itself, which is Erev Shabbos, right, when you really begin to think about Shabbos, Chatzos, 12 o'clock noon on Friday, you see. At that time, people begin to think seriously about Shabbos and preparing for Shabbos. Therefore, 12 o'clock noon on that creation calendar is very significant because it's the turnaround. It's when the sun begins to set, never to rise again, and it's the last day of creation, you see. What English year corresponds to Friday at 12 o'clock noon? The answer to that is 5,750. That corresponds to 12 o'clock noon, and that's the English date of September 1989. Anybody who knew this concept of a calendar would immediately have said or known that after September 1989, everything's going to blow up, because that's the Hachana, that's the beginning of the end. What happened? You know what happened. The Berlin Wall collapsed. The Germany's united. Communism collapsed. Then they tried to blow up the World Trade Center. Then you had what? You had the internet. You had so many things going on. The enormous proliferation of chokhmah, science, everything blows up at once, just around that time, you see. In the last 27, 28 years, the world has never been the same. It's incredible what's been happening. Why? Because Chatzos, 12 o'clock on Friday on the creation calendar, right, is September 1989, and from that time on, we begin to think about Shabbos, which is the beginning of the end. Now, the next pivotal time, which we have to understand, is 12 o'clock and a half hour. It's called Shesh V'Chetzi, 12:30, okay, which is 5,750 is Chatzos, but if you add another 30 minutes, it comes out to an interesting year, and I'm going to talk about that. Shesh V'Chetzi, which is, why do you have to wait a half hour after midday? Because the sun begins to incline to the west. So therefore you can see the shadow, because it's no longer at its zenith. So when the sun begins to incline in the west, you can see the shadow, and that's when you can daven Mincha Gedolah, you see. What year is that? That's 2008 or 2009. It's an interesting year, 2009. We have to understand what the repercussions were. But why is that so important? Because from 12:30, not 12:30 in the creation calendar, you see, from that year, 5,770 or 68, I think it was, right? On that year, what happens is that begins the time period called Beinu Arbayim. Beinu Arbayim is when you can daven mincha. And from 12:30 and on the creation calendar, right, you can daven mincha after Shesh V'Chetzi, 6.5 hours. What's the importance about that, as I said, is Beinu Arbayim. And in the Novi it says, Li'es Erev Yihye Or. At the time of evening there would be light. What does that mean? That means the real hachana of Mashiach, to bring him in, will begin then. And by the way, the Gemara says, that, as I said, that the world will last 6,000 years. That means this world will be over in the English year 2240. That's 223 years from now. The world ends. That means that the Mashiach has to have come before and ended his reign by that year. That's right. The Mashiach's reign himself ends before the year 2240, you see. And after 2240, which is the year 6000, the world now begins to change. The zikuch, the retransformation begins to take place, and we go from Olam Haba eventually into Olam Haba. And that takes place in 223 years. But the Mashiach is a period of time which has to come before, and he ends his reign in that year. So this is a very pivotal time between 12:30 and 6 p.m. Friday, which is the entry of Shabbos. Now, let's take a look. What happens in 2008, 2009? And we are about, right now, 2017, we're about 12:40. We are now 10 minutes past that pivotal time of Bein Arbaim. What happens? Okay, we all know what happens. Obama, right? Obama got elected in 2008, and he took office in 2009. Now, it's important to understand something. There are two nations which are really part of the Tikkun process, and we will see what that means. The first one was Yishmael. Yishmael also was part of that Tikkun process, even though he became a Rasha. But in the end of time, Yishmael became a tzaddik. He did tshuva. And we know that because Rashi says, it says Vayikva by Yishmael, which means the Torah only uses the expression Vayikva, basically, if you're a tzaddik. Otherwise, we use the expression Vayomas. So Yishmael did tshuva. One of the interesting proofs of that is we have a Tana called Rabbi Yishmael. Why would anybody name himself after a Rasha if Yishmael never did tshuva? In any case, Yishmael did tshuva. So what the Moshe wants is something very interesting. He wants to bring back Yishmael before the end. He wants to make Yishmael and Esau part of the Tikkun process, so that they will get, in other words, that they will get reward for helping the process to continue. Look, all nations will realize what the era was after, right? After Mashiach comes. They all know that. But there's no reward for that because there's no Bechira after Mashiach comes, because everybody knows what the truth is, you see. But all nations will do tshuva, if you think about it. As it says in the beginning, outside the building. V'hoya beisi, right? Beis tefillah l'chol ha'amim, right? Isn't that your motto? That's exactly what it is. This house will be a house of prayer for all nations, because all nations know what the truth is. Mashiach is here. Everybody knows what the truth is. As they say, the gig is up, you see. So therefore, what the Moshe wants is that Yishmael and Esau should do tshuva really before and be part of that process. Obama is a very interesting person. You know where you see the hand of God by Obama? You see, there are several things that you see. And don't make a mistake. Don't be naive. Only God can pull it off. Nobody else. Obama was elected as a ness, as an unbelievable miracle. He's a guy that was nobody. He was a senator for a couple of months, right? He's a nobody, this guy. And how does this guy not only manage to become the president? I mean, look at his resume. You know, his resume is a community organizer. I mean, you can go from a community organizer to become the president of the United States? That's absurd. Not only that, he has an incredible amount of scandals. So he has no experience really. He's a newcomer. Nobody ever heard of the guy before, right? And he becomes president, and he has an enormous amount of scandals, right? With communists and all kinds of leftists and progressives and so on. How does a guy become president? That's number one. It's a miracle. Second idea, not only does he become president, you know, he didn't have an inauguration. He had a coronation. He was elected king of America. I don't know if you recall, but when he was elected, chills ran down everybody's spine. It's like the Messiah. They called him the Messiah. You ever hear something like that? So what that means is that he had unprecedented power to do something with America. And not only that, not only was elected as it's a miracle, but the way he influenced America, it's like they worshipped the guy. They couldn't have enough of this guy. And the third thing, he won the Congress. Both houses became Democratic. He had unprecedented ability to influence who? And the answer is the Arabs. What he should have done, which he didn't, he should have stood up to the Arab nations and said, excuse me, what are you guys talking about? Israel isn't occupied territory. What do you mean occupied? How can that be? There's no such thing as a Palestinian state. So they're not occupying you. You're part of a territory that has no legal name. You see? It's not Palestine. So why are they occupying you? Not only that, what are you so angry about? What, are you jealous of the Jews? What are you doing? The whole thing is a charade. It's a fraud. And he could have done it, and he would have had the whole America behind him. Why? Because they worship the man. God gave unprecedented power to do that. But he failed because he's a megalomaniac. That's why. His gaiva destroyed him. And therefore, the first foreign leader he calls up is Muhammad Abbas. First guy. Is he out of his mind? Not only that, he gave that speech in Cairo, right? What are you doing? Well, he's actually showing them that he's going to enable them, empower them. He failed, which is interesting. That's what Obama did, okay? But he had an incredible chance. This is not an accident. God gave him that power to do something with that power for the sake of Yishmael. Why? Because Obama he is a Muslim. That's really what he is. And that's why he bowed down to Saudi Arabia, whatever the guy's name was. In any case, but basically what he did is he failed. In any case, so the Rebbe says, not only did he try to empower the Arabs, you see, but he embarrassed the Jews. He ultimately stabbed in the back. So Obama did certain things which were terrible, but they're all part of the Messianic process. Never think that anything that goes on is not part of that process. It's all part of the process. Let me show you how. Okay. First thing he did is he empowered the Arabs. Number one. Number two, he designated the end of time. Are you aware that Obama designated the end of time? I'll show you. There's a medrash in the Yalkut Shimoni, that says the following: B'shavua sheben David bo, in the week or the day when he comes, Mashiach ben David, what's going to happen? It says Poras, Persia, which is Iran, is going to instigate a war with Arabia. And Arabia will do what? They will take counsel with Edom. And then what? Then it says that Poras will begin to be Mahr of the world, will be destroyed, the world. This medrash was written 2,000 years ago. What an uncanny prophecy. How is it possible that Poras, Iran, to begin to destroy the world? That's impossible. And the answer is, of course not. Nuclear. They can do it with a bomb, can't they? The Medrash saw this 2,000 years ago, that they would have the capacity to do this, you see. Then it says, in the same Medrash, that the world is going to be frightened, because they have, obviously, capability of destroying the world, nuclear, right? And then all of a sudden, it says a baskoil, right? A divine voice comes out and says, don't be afraid, my people. Higia zman gi'ulaschem. The time of your redemption has arrived. What does that mean? That's it. That is the end. The war with Iran is the end, you see. That's what the Rebbe says. That is the last war, and that is the redemption. The Medrash. Therefore, we see this now. Who is the one who enabled Iran to go nuclear? Obama. Do you realize that means, based on this Medrash, that he designated the end of time? Because that's it. They're the last war. So this guy, right, well, all he did was speed up the Messianic era by designating the end. It's astounding what the man did. He doesn't even know how he accelerated the process. Then there's a nevuah. The nevuah is called Gog and Magog. We know from Yecheskel that there will be a war between Gog from the land of Magog against the Jews and Jerusalem. We know that, Yecheskel. This is called the war of Gog and Magog. What is the war of Gog and Magog really? It is really a resurgence of evil. Where do we learn this from? By Yetzias Mitzrayim. When the Rebbe destroyed Egypt, right? All of a sudden the Jews left, right? And they came to the Yam Suf, and all of a sudden the Egyptians realized what they did. We let them all out. So what happened is, even though they were destroyed, they went after the Jews. That's the concept of Goy. The world realizes it's ending, or their way of life is ending, so what they do is they go after the Jews. That's exactly what Egypt did. Kriyas Yamsuf is the forerunner of Gog and Magog. And that's exactly what happens, you see, in the end of time. There's a guy, Gog, right, with Magog, who is his country or whatever, and he leads a nation against the Jews and against also Mashiach, because it's a Messianic war. But that prophecy is foretold. Well, how's Mashiach going to come without Gog and Magog? So I want to tell you certain ideas. The brutality of that war that Gog is supposed to do to the Jewish people is stated in the Gemara. It says there that only 1 or 2 families will survive. That's it. Without getting into why. What the Baruch Shem has done is very interesting. He has used a tekufa, the Holocaust, to absorb the onslaught of that war of Gog and Magog. Therefore, the real confrontation won't be a military confrontation. It will be a confrontation, but not military, you see. Because the destruction that that war was supposed to do was absorbed and fulfilled in the Holocaust. Because the Holocaust is the war of Gog and Magog, second stage. Because the Gog and Magog is 3 stages, without going into the whole idea. World War I was the first stage of Gog and Magog. Second is World War II. And the third is when? Is now. You know what Obama did? We ought to give Obama a tremendous yasher koyach. You know why? Think about this. What the UN did was astounding, because it makes no sense. You know, if you want to say that Yehud and Shomron are occupied territory, I mean, that's insanity, as I just pointed out. Okay. But okay, you want to say that, fine. But how can you say Jerusalem is occupied territory? I mean, are you psychotic? Are you out of your mind? Jerusalem is the capital of Israel from how long, right? Yerushalayim is brought down in the Novi 700 times, approximately, right? Not only that, everybody knows that the Jews are connected to Jerusalem and Israel, right? Jews have biblical proof. They have historical proof. Even their New Testament says that their guy overturned the money changers table in the temple. The New Testament refers to the temple of the Jews. We're talking about 2 billion Christians, right? So how could they say that Jerusalem is occupied territory? They're psychotic. It's astounding, you see. The question is, why did they do that? Why did they include Jerusalem? They should have just stuck to their guns and just said, hey, Yehud and Shomron, Judea and Samaria, that's occupied. Which is, of course, is absurd. But how could you include Jerusalem, which everybody knows is absurd? And the answer is, because the Baruch Shem used that. Gog and Magog is the UN. In fact, the gematria of Gog and Magog is 70. And the UN really has 70 nations. Because there are really only 70 nations. There are 70 roots from which all the nations of the world emerge, you see. And the UN is Gog and Magog, you see. So the reason why they included Jerusalem is because they had to. Because then they fulfill the prophecy of the confrontation between the UN, which is the entire world. Think about that. The UN represents the entire planet. And they went against, they confronted the Jewish people. So lo and behold, Obama, who initiated that by betraying the Jewish people, actually designated the UN's resolution against the Jews as Gog and Magog. We have to thank the guy. Because what Obama did is he removed the impediment against Klal Yisrael, which means that you have to have Gog and Magog happen before the Mashiach come. So Obama did that. He designated the end of time, and he designates the UN itself as Gog and Magog, because the UN represents the entire world. There's 193 nations. If anybody represents the Gog and Magog, it's the UN. That's really what it is. Messianic, the hand of God, even though they don't understand that, because what they did makes absolutely no sense. But don't worry, the Russian will destroy Obama. And that's what he's going to do. Because if the man's such a Russia, he was going to wipe him out. How? Well, first of all, he's no longer president. Second of all, he has no continuity of his agenda or his legacy, which is Hillary. Hillary was destroyed, okay? And therefore, the whole continuity of Obama is gone, you see. Not only that, right, but Trump is overturning the entire legacy of Obama. You have any idea what a punishment that is for a megalomaniac? That his legacy should be destroyed? You see? And not only that, what's happening is also, he's building a library in Chicago. It's called the Presidential Library, where they house all the presidential papers. So you can imagine all his presidential papers, his legislation, right? It's going to be exhibited. And you're going to have the legislation, and next to each one it's going to say, canceled, canceled, canceled. Because that's exactly what he's doing. So not only, he will never be forgotten. I mean, at this rate, he'll never be forgotten. You see? Because it's going to, the fact that he has nothing to show for being president is going to be forever a stain on his legacy. I mean, when the Russian wants to get you, you're finished. And that's exactly what he's doing to Obama. But let me move on to better things. In order to understand what's going on now, I'm just trying to show you, you can interpret all this one way, but you don't realize it's the Yad Hashem, the hand of God, doing things that nobody suspects. But that's really what's happening. It's an astounding thing to watch. What he was supposed to do, how he failed, and how he's being destroyed, you see. And also what the UN is, and the whole concept of Iran. In any case, in order to understand the next concepts, who is Trump? What in the world is going on? That is the question. Half of America is enraged, and the other half is dazed. That's what's happening in America. I mean, when you walk into that country, either half of America, right, has to take anger management courses, and the other half is taking Valium. It's a rather strange mix. What is going on here? Where is the hand of God? Let me show you what's happening, which is incredible. For that, we have to look at the source of everything. What is the source of all human knowledge? The Torah. Let's look at what the Torah says. And incredibly, if you understand what the Torah says, you will realize that you could have predicted the election of Trump. That's how I did it. Yaakov and Esau. Who is Yaakov and Esau? Well, do you ever wonder about the fact that how many Imors are there? There are 4, right? Last time we counted? Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, right? And Leah. Am I right? Okay. How many of us are there? 3. There's Avram, there's Yitzchak, and there's Yaakov. Right? Why? Why are there 4 Imors, and why are there only 3 of us? And the answer is, there aren't 3 of us. There are only 4. Do you know that? That's the mistake everybody makes. Who's the 4th of? The 4th of is Esau. He is the 4th of, you see. You had Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Esau, you see. Now, there's a concept called, Avram represents a certain spiritual force called Chesed. Yitzchak represented a spiritual force called Gevurah. Yaakov represented a spiritual force called Tiferes. What is Tiferes? It's also represented geometrically. Chesed is on the right, Gevurah is on the left, and Tiferes is a middle force. But every middle has a right side and a left side. That's the way it works. So therefore, the right side of Tiferes is Yaakov. And his job was to bring down Kedusha, MS. The left side of Tiferes, of the middle force, is called Esau. Esau was an Ov that represented the left side of Tiferes. In fact, what the Paneach Raza says, and he's a Rishon, he says that Esau, had he done his job, which he didn't, he would have been twice as great as Yaakov Avinu. Do you believe this? Can we comprehend who Yaakov Avinu was? Esau would have been twice as great because his capacity was awesome. And the Paneach Raza says, where do we see this? Because the gematria of Yaakov twice multiplied by 2 is the gematria exactly of Esau. And that's Yaakov spelled with a Vav. Therefore, he says, Esau had the capacity to be twice as great as Yaakov Avinu. Amazing, isn't it? What does that mean? What that says is what? Is that, like I said, the job of Yaakov was to bring down Kedusha, Yoshiv Holam, to sit in tents and learn. The job of Esau was to go into the world, Ish Sodeh, and to subdue the world. How? By going into the world, which is Tomei, Yetzer Hara, and remaining righteous. That was his job, you see. So Esau's job was to fight with the Sutan, the Yetzer Hara, and kill it by remaining a tzaddik. You see? Esau failed in that job. Everybody has free will. So Esau is a classic story of failure. What was the job of Esau? The job of Esau, as I said, was to fight the Yetzer Hara in the world, subdue it by remaining righteous, and he would destroy the Sutan. Therefore, his job is the job of the prophecy that they told Rivka when she went to complain to Shem Va'eva about what's happening, 2 kids fighting in her. The job of Esau was Rav Ya'avoid So'ir, that the older will serve the younger, which is Esau will serve Yaakov, and with Yaakov, Esau and Yaakov together, they will do the tikkun process. It required both aspects of Tiferes. Yaakov on the right side, Esau on the left side, and both of them would do the tikkun process, you see. That was the original job of Esau. But instead, Esau did what? Fail. So what happened was incredible. There's a midrash that says, it says the pasuk, Rav Ya'avoid So'ir, the older will serve the younger. But if you look in the Torah doesn't have any nekudas, it has no punctuation. So you could read Rav Ya'avoid So'ir, or Rav Ya'aved So'ir. He will subjugate and persecute the younger. You see? So if you remember correctly, last time I said what? That one of the jobs of tikkun is suffering. So what Esau did is he turned to help Yaakov from somebody who would serve Yaakov to assist him to somebody who would persecute and make him suffer. Either way, he does the tikkun, you see? And therefore, he became a major component in what? In the tikkun of Yaakov. So Esau all of a sudden becomes part of the tikkun process, but not serving Yaakov, but to persecute and make him suffer. It's an astounding concept. But Esau really is part of that. Now, if you think about that, what happens? Yaakov fights with the Malach. We know it from the story. Who is this Malach? So Rashi says that Malach is the Sutan, the great man, the great angel himself. And he's the angel of Esau. Because since Esau had to fight with the Malach, he had to be connected to him. And if he fails, then the Sutan himself becomes the Malach of Esau, the angel of Esau, you see. So what happens? Yaakov fights with the Malach, okay, and he subdues him. Then Yaakov wants to meet Esau, and he's afraid, you see. So what does Esau say? Esau says an incredible thing. We know that Esau is coming to kill Yaakov with 400 guys. Instead, Esau says something remarkable. Yehi lecha asher loch, that which is yours, remain yours. Rashi says that, which means that you stole my brachas, but I'm letting you keep it. What does that mean? That means Esau is doing tshuva. That's what it is. Esau is doing tshuva, you see. So what the Rebbeinu Shalom wanted to happen at that moment is that Yaakov should have realized that Esau is right up against the door of tshuva. Why? Because first of all, he weakened and beat the Sutan, and since the Sutan is tied to Esau as a Yetzer Hara, since he weakened the Sutan, he weakened the whole power of evil over Esau. Number one. And number two, Esau was doing tshuva by saying, you can keep the brachas. And number three, Yaakov should have given Dinah. Dinah was an extraordinary girl. You know, she was like, she could have easily led the whole Baal Tshuva movement just by herself. She was what's called the Yatsonis. Vaytetzei Dinah, Liris is Benois Oretz. Why do you think she went out? Because she wanted to hang around with the Goyim? No. She wanted to go out and bring girls, like Avraham Avinu did, to Judaism. In any case, she was what's called a Yatsonis. She could have taken Esau, who was ready to do tshuva, and as they say in English, made mincemeat out of him. She could have gotten him to do tshuva. Yes. And the Baruch Hashem was very angry with Yaakov. And that was the punishment of Dinah. You don't want to give Dinah to Esau? I'll give it to Shechem. In any case, this is what we see. That Esau could have done tshuva. What does that mean, he could have done tshuva? Right? It means that Esau could have gone from Rav Ya'aved So'ir, the older will persecute the younger, or Rav Ya'avoid So'ir, he will serve. That's what Esau could have gone. You have an idea what the reward Yaakov would have received? Could you imagine how Yitzchak was pained? Yitzchak Avinu loved Esau, right? He loved him. We know that. Yeah, it says Yitzchak Ohev as Esau. Could you imagine how he felt seeing that Esau is what? Becomes completely irreligious, so to speak? If Yaakov would have brought Esau back, what kind of a joy would that have been to Yitzchak? What a kibbut over aim. And we suffer because Esau's kibbut over aim. And not only that, could you imagine having Esau back in the fold of Klal Yisrael? You know what that would have meant? No Rome, no Christianity, none of this. Because all of them get their power from Esau. What a mistake. Any case, we cannot judge Yaakov Avinu, because Yaakov Avinu is a person we can't even begin to understand who he was. But from God's perspective, and obviously he was punished, obviously he made a severe mistake. And anybody can make a mistake. Even Moshe Rabbeinu made mistakes. In any case, therefore what the Baruch Hashem wanted, he wanted Esau to be part of the tikkun process, not as a Ya'aved, but as a Ya'avoid. You should, that portion of the Torah is an unbelievable prophecy of what will happen. When Yaakov will meet Esau, and Esau will do tshuva, which he will, as I will show you, what Esau is going to say to Yaakov, what is yours, keep it. It's yours. Who did that? Isn't that what Trump did with Netanyahu, basically? He said, Israel is yours. You know, just do me a favor, make a deal. Make peace. I don't care how you do it. It's irrelevant to me if it's one state, two states, right? What he essentially told Netanyahu and the Jewish people, it's your country, that's all. The only thing I ask of you is try to make peace with these guys. You know those guys running around in bed sheets? Please, try to make peace with them. That's all. But he essentially said, it's your country. Isn't that Yehi Lecha Shaloch? Let that which is yours be yours? That's really what it is, you see. Now, what do we see from this? Let's take a look. Remember, don't be naive. Let's take a look at Trump. Because he failed, because Obama failed to do what he should have done, right? God gave him 2 years, from 2009 to 2011, and he failed. Once you had 2011, 3 things happened, which eradicated his possibility. One is the House became Republican. So Obama now lost, in many ways, the ability to do his agenda. Because if you remember the elections, the House, he lost. He lost the House. That was the first thing. Second thing is the Arab Spring began in January 2011. That's when it began. The fall of Ishmael began in 2011, which was astounding. I don't know if you remember how it began in Tunisia, where there was a guy who was an engineer, couldn't get a job, so he was a vegetable vendor. He has 7 kids. So a policeman, a woman, came over to him and said to him, "Where's your license for this?" So he said, "I don't have one." She said, "I'm sorry, I got to close up." He said, "We close up. I don't have a job. I tried to become an engineer. There's no jobs in Tunisia, right? So therefore I have to support my family. Don't do this." So she said, "I'm sorry, you got to get out." So he protested, and she got angry, and she smacked him across his face. You have any idea what it is for an Arab to be smacked by a woman? Okay, so what he did, he was enraged. The next day, he sat down in the middle of the marketplace, he poured gasoline over him, and he lit himself on fire, and he burned to death. That one act of this Arab in Tunisia, in January of 2011, ignited the war and the entire Arab Spring. And that's what happened in the same month that Obama lost his power, if you realize that. And we are witnessing the fall of Yishmael without a bullet being fired. Talk about the hand of God when the Moshe says, don't worry. And I want to tell you something which is important. There are 3 psukim that always refer messianically. 1, Even Moasu Haboinim, right? The stone that the builders despised, became the cornerstone. That's number 1, okay? And believe me, Trump is despised. 2, V'nahapechu, that it'll go into the cornerstone overnight. V'nahapechu, it'll be so fast your head will spin. And number 3, his yatzvu, stand back by Kriya Samsov, watch what I do. And that's exactly what happened. The rise of Trump is a miracle. In fact, let me read you something which is very interesting. Listen to this. April 30th, 2011. Let's focus on 2011, right? A day that will live in infamy or be held in esteem, depending on whom you ask. Why? According to Roger Stone, who is a longtime Trump advisor, after Trump was humiliated in public by then President Obama at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, because Obama raked the coals with Trump, which is astounding. So Trump said, listen to what he said on April 30th, 2011. Maybe I'll just run. Maybe I'll show them all. Interesting. Stone said, I think that is the night he resolved to run for president. And April 30th is Nisan. That's the time of Geula. Obama himself caused Trump to run. And of course he overthrew Obama. How ironic is it, you see? And all of this happened. Arab Spring, the end of the Obama's ability to really influence the world, and the beginning of the rise of Trump happened in 2011. Interesting. Now let's take a look at Trump. Who is Trump? What is this? What is going on? Well, you have now enough information to understand. Trump's rise is a nes nigla, you should know. It's incredible. First of all, on June 15, 2016, he decides to run. Do you know how he was looked on in the beginning? As a clown. You know, the elections, you know, the campaign, they needed somebody to laugh at. So they all said, well, he's going to run, right? Of course, it's a joke. Trump is going to become president. Impossible. And they thought he was a clown. That's how it started. But that clown negated, overturned 16 presidential candidates. Each one is a heavyweight to be president. They're all governors, senators, guys with years of political experience. And he beat them all. It's astounding. You should have realized immediately, this is the hand of God. How does a man do this? Not only that, everybody, the media followed him. It was astounding. It never happened before, because usually the media calls the shots in an election. They were running after Trump. He dictated terms to the media. Not only that, he had 20,000 people that came to his campaign stops. All the polls, no matter what scandal he did, he always went up. He defied gravity. What is this? You see, he has no political experience, no military experience, no diplomatic experience. He's not even a lawyer, you see. And lawyers are very bad politicians, and America just doesn't get it. Just like generals in Israel are bad politicians, and Israel doesn't get it. But in any case, he has nothing, you see. How in the world does this guy with no credentials, who's a laughing stock, right? And not only, how does he do this? Not only that, everybody hated the man. Think about that. He's the most hated man in the century. Think about this. Obama hates Trump. Hillary hates Trump. The media hates the man. The Democratic Party hates Trump. The Republican Party hates Trump. The liberals, the progressives, the leftists, they hate Trump. And even his own, and he was undoing himself by his own scandals. It's incredible. So the question is, how in the world does a guy like this become president of the United States? It's impossible. No credentials. Everybody hates the guy. So how in the world does he do that? You should know, his election is unprecedented in U.S. history. Even now it's unprecedented. He's doing more in the last 3-4 weeks than Obama did in 8 years. And nobody could believe this. Nobody's ever seen this. And he's completely politically incorrect. Completely. How do you understand this? And the answer is, and I will tell you, because the purpose of Obama, the purpose of Trump, is to be matahar Edom. You remember I said that in the end, Esau will do tshuva. How do we know this? Because we know there are at least 4 chazals that refer to that. One, you know the chazer is what? The chazer is an animal that represents Esau. And what does the Gemara say? That the chazer ultimately will become kosher. For all those people who have been dreaming about ham and eggs, someday you'll be able to have your bacon and eggs, right? And the chazer, which means if the chazer becomes kosher, it means Esau will do tshuva. That's number 1. Not only that, you remember the head of Esau is in by Mara Samachpela, right? When he was trying to stop the burial of Yaakov Avinu. So Hushim ben Don, he said, what kind of nonsense is this? So he goes to the back of Esau. He couldn't go to his front because Esau looks just like Yaakov Avinu. They're twins. So it says Hushim ben Don went behind him and lopped off his head. And the head rolled in the kever of Yaakov Avinu. And the question is, what? This man's head is in the grave of Yaakov Avinu? Yes, because the head of Esau is holy. Just the body is bad news. You see, that's another concept, that there's an aspect of Esau that does tshuva. And then there's a medrash, incredible medrash, that says that in the end of time, Esau is going to be in Gan Eden, and he's going to sneak up to the top. Typical. So the Moshe is going to look at Esau and say, excuse me, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. Get back down to the lower part of Gan Eden. The question is, what's he doing in Gan Eden? What is Esau doing in Gan Eden? And the answer is, because there's a tahara of Esau. You see, and that's a very important idea. And there's another Yalkut, it's Ruveni, incredible Yalkut that says this. These are chazals that are marames, what is going to be. And I told you the pasuk, Yehiluch Hasheloch, what will be. Where the chazal say that the Baruch took the sins of the Jews and he placed it on Esau. And Esau said, I cannot bear this. It's too heavy. So Baruch says, okay, because when you admit that you cannot bear the sin, you're really admitting that you sinned. And that's a half of a tshuva. So Baruch says, okay, he takes the sins of the Jews that he put on top of Esau, and he puts it on his clothing. And his clothing turned red. So Esau still complained, and the Baruch took the clothing of Esau and he turned it into white. Sheleg. And what do we say on Yom Kippur? That our sins should be like sheleg, right? That means in the end of time, Esau does tshuva. Where and how? This is what Trump is all about. The job of Trump is to be matar Edom, to go from Ya'aved, to persecute the Jews, to Ya'avoid. He will serve Jacob. That's why what you're looking on is absolutely incredible. He needs to assist the Jews before the Mashiach comes. So his reward is unbelievable to do the tikkun. And that's what you really see. That's the true concept. He is a Toiv Sheba Esau. I want to tell you something. Did you notice the meeting between Netanyahu and Trump? It's incredible. I have a picture where they walked off, and then somebody snapped the picture while they walked off, where Trump's hand is on the back of Netanyahu, and Netanyahu's hand is on the back of Trump. What is this? This never happened. What president in history, it's like, you know what really like? It's like two brothers that have found each other after thousands of years. It's like a reunion. That's what it looked like. You couldn't believe this was Trump and this is Netanyahu, and they're walking with one hand on the back of another. What is this? I mean, that picture's it's like you can't believe the picture. You cannot believe that this is Trump, an American president, and this is Netanyahu. Why? Because that's what is happening. That's what the Baruch wants. He wants to restore the achva, the brotherhood of Edom, Esau, and Klal Yisrael. In other words, Esau is now going to help Klal Yisrael do the job that he should have done 4,000 years ago. He should have done that job. It's astounding to watch. Not only that, but with this Tahara of Edom, you see what the Moshe does. You should know you're not witnessing just a president in Israel. You're witnessing an overthrow of Ra itself. Look what he did, Trump. In one election, in one fell swoop, the Moshe is destroying Obama. He's destroying Hillary, which is a whole different part of a Shia itself. He's destroying the media because now Trump is just tweeting. He doesn't even need the media anymore. And they made a tremendous mistake. You can't take on Trump. They're fooling around with the wrong guy. You know why? Because Trump was chosen, whatever schus, because whatever schus Trump has to be the man, okay? You cannot, why? Because Trump has two major characteristics that qualify him to be president, or I should say, Edom, to help the Jews get back everything they need. You know what they are? Whatever he is, and he's got his interesting character flaws, whatever that is, right? As we all do, right? But there's two things he has which are remarkable. He's an ish emes. He says the truth. In fact, that's what gets him into trouble all the time. He's so truthful that people can't believe that he's not politically correct, right? He calls the shots, totally. And the second thing, which is astounding what this man has, he has the mid of Esau. What's the mid of Esau? Vayivez, to defy. This man has the Guinness World Record in defiance. He will stand up to anybody. And that's what the Moshe needs. He needs a guy to defy evil. And look at him. Who else would sit there and curse out the media? It's incredible what this guy's doing. You know, he calls everybody a liar, an anarchist. It's just astounding. And this is the president. And he's always defending his reputation, right? And he's always defying him. You never saw this. Every president is politically correct. They don't come out like him. He's like a bull in a china shop, right? Wherever he moves, he destroys $1,000 worth of dishes. It's like, it's incredible. You should know, Trump is not a president. He's a phenomenon. Everybody who has the internet wakes up every morning and say, okay, what's going to happen today? Because they know something incredible is going to happen today. Because that's who he is. You know, he doesn't care. He's not interested. And now you understand something very important. Why is he a billionaire? What do you think? It's because it's him? Of course not. Because the Baruch Shem said, I need you to be Matar Edom. I need you to go back to Rav Yavo Itzoya. Therefore, you need to have $8 billion or whatever the guy has, right? So you will promise and deliver on your promises. Nobody can bribe you. I don't care if it's special interest, because you don't need anybody. You got all the money anybody could ever wish to have. That's number one. Look at the hachana of Trump. Number two, real estate. How did he make his money in real estate? New York. Most of the people in real estate in New York are Jews. Right? He knows Jews intimately. It's not like Obama. He knows Jews intimately. He's worked with them. And the Baruch Shem needs a guy who loves Jews, and Trump does love Jews. And he does. Not only that, he's got a daughter, Ivanka, who's Jewish. She's a frummer girl. Right? Not only that, then he's got Jared Kushner, who married. He's a frummer guy. Then he's got Jason Greenblatt, who's a frum. His chief counsel is a frum Orthodox Jew. Right? All his kids are either married to Jews or they are dating Jews. You see? And then he puts David Friedman. I mean, what is this? I can't believe that he's not Jewish. Why is this happening? And the answer to that is because he needs to know who the Jews are. Why? Because Trump has certain specific tasks. And the Baruch Shem has incredibly placed them by a miracle to become president of the United States. Because he's got 8 tasks to do. Listen carefully. Because the major part of this year is about to happen. This was just an intro. 1. He has to assist the Jews in trade and military. Both. He's going to give the Jews whatever they need in terms of defending themselves and also in trade. That's number one. Not only that, he's going to allow Israel to build itself. You know, okay, do me a favor, just slow down a little with the settlements. It's a joke. When he said that, you know, some reporter asked him, you know, he looked at Netanyahu and Antonio looked at him and they both smiled. It's like they were both saying, it's like a private joke between them. You know, ha ha, you know. And the reason why is because he has to build Israel for the kibbutz goliath. That's why. Not only that, but he has to also protect Israel from Iran, which he's going to do, because he will not take the nonsense of Iran. He's already put Iran on notice. I mean, it is just incredible to watch this man defend the truth. He's going to move, I guarantee you, he's going to move the end of sea to Jerusalem. Why? It's not just a symbolic gesture. It's much more than that. The reason why he has to do that is because he's going to demonstrate that he has become the big brother of Israel. Because that's what it means. Not only that, everybody's going to line up to trade with Israel because they all want to curry favor with Trump. So by doing that, if you're good to Israel, then Trump will like you. So all of a sudden there will be a tremendous increase in trade. But what's the most important is that he will raise the status of Jews throughout the entire world. You know what that is? Of a nation of 8 million people to become one of the world's greatest nations. How do you think the Arabs became so great? Because Clinton raised the stature of the Arabs through Arafat. And that's why all of a sudden everybody said, wow, if Clinton puts them in the Blair House all the time, they must be important. America is the greatest nation on earth. And if they go out of their way to honor Jews, that will raise the stature of Jews. But that's incredible. Could you imagine the stature of Jews will be raised throughout the entire world? And that's what it is to move the embassy. He will also neutralize the Arabs. Instead of Obama empowering them, he will neutralize them. You see, and he will make America great. Why? And now you have to understand the real reason what the Rebbe wants to do. The Rebbe wants Esau to be part of the tikkun process, from Ya'aved to Ya'avoid. That's critical, because Esau did tshuva, he never had a chance to finish it, which is unfortunate, because Yaakov Avinu did not take advantage of the fact that Esau almost did tshuva. And what's amazing is that Torah almost indicates that with one word, because it says Vayelech ledarka Esau, and Esau went to his way. Vayelech ledarka Seira, and Esau went his way to Seir, because he lived in Seir, right? What's this ledarka? It should just say, and Esau returned to Seir. What do you mean Esau returned and went his way? It means he went his way to evil. Yaakov could have made him about tshuva, so he went back to his way of evil. That ledarka indicates the entire concept of what Yaakov unfortunately did. But what does all this mean really for us Jews? What does this have to do with the Messianic process? It's great. It'll put Israel on a pedestal. Fabulous, right? We're talking about trade, military. It's going to be very good. However, why is Trump, Esau? Why is it? How does it indicate the Messianic process? And the answer to that: who is the most dangerous person in the world? Who is that? Do you know that the world has an incredibly dangerous individual? The most dangerous person who ever lived. You know who that is? The Mashiach. The Mashiach is the most dangerous person who ever lived. You know why? I know it sounds very strange. And nobody understands this. Who is this Mashiach? I will tell you. The Medrash says, it says in Yeshayahu, Hine Yaskel Avdi, behold, my servant will grow wise. And it has 3 expressions of growth. V'yoram, v'niso, v'gova mi'oid. So the Medrash says, what's this 3 expressions of growth? Because who is Yaskel Avdi? Who is my servant will grow wise? It's a machlokas. But the Targum says, Malka Mashiach. It's a Mashiach. What does it mean, 3 ways of growing? 1, the first expression of growth, okay? V'yoram, means that the Mashiach will be greater than Avram Avinu. Not bad. Do we have any idea who Avram Avinu was? Second expression, Veniso, and he will grow high. Who is that? That the Mashiach not only will be greater than Avraham Avinu, he will be greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. Do we know who Moshe Rabbeinu was? Could you imagine meeting Moshe Rabbeinu in Shul? You'd plotz. You'd faint. You can imagine the kedusha of that man. We cannot understand him, right? And then who's the third expression of growth? He will be greater than the Malachim. Could you, Malch Ashoris, ministering angels, could you imagine a man walking amongst us, and that's really what the Mashiach is, who is greater than the Malachim, Moshe and Avraham Avinu? What do you think he's going to do to you? You'll just die right in front of the guy. You cannot tolerate that Kedusha. And that's number one. What is he going to reveal? Most people think that the Mashiach is a political figure, that he's going to free the Jews. Of course not. That's not the essential job of the Mashiach. The essential job of the Mashiach is to bring down awe, an unbelievable consciousness of Ruchnius. He's going to bring down a messianic light, the Or Mashiach, the Or Rishon, the Or Agonis, that the world has never seen before, that has been concealed in the 7 days of in the beginning of creation. That Or will kill you. We can't serve that Or. Of course not. The whole world can't serve that Or. You want to see how? You remember Rab Shimba Yechoy, when the Romans chased him? He went into a cave for 12 years, and then he went out of the cave. He took one look at a farmer. Remember the Gemara? He was farming. He took one look at him and says, "You're farming? How could you be farming? How could you not be involved in Ruchnias?" And the guy became a heap of bones. And that's Rab Shimon. Where does Rab Shimon come to the Mashiach? If that man became a heap of bones, could you imagine what the Mashiach will do to this world? Because of the Or Mashiach. In fact, when Klal Yisrael, therefore, the world needs a hachana. It needs a preparation. That's what it needs. Everything has a preparation, including Mashiach. When Moshe Rabbeinu came, he was the Mashiach almost. Klal Yisrael needed a hachana in Egypt because they were memtes shari tumah. So what was the preparation? For 1 year they had the makas, the plagues. And for each makkah that the Egyptian had, there was an unbelievable revelation of some aspect of God at the same time. Not only that, when they stood at Kriyas Yamsuf, an Oma Evriya, a Hebrew maidservant, saw more than Yechezkel Hanavi, whose whole sefer is the origin of Kabbalah. She saw more. Second Hachana. Third Hachana is the 49 days. And that Hachana left him at Har Sinai, right? It left him equal to Adam Arishin before the sin. And even then, when God revealed himself to them, the first 2 commandments, everybody died. Why? Because the revelation of the Ribono Shel Olam at that moment was equal to the Orishon. That was the Messianic light, and they all died. Could you imagine what's going to happen to the Jews and the whole world when this man comes here? Nobody can serve for them. Therefore, the Ribono Shel Olam needs a hachana before the Mashiach comes. He will not expose this man to a world that's worse than the Mem Teshar Tumah. What's the preparation? 2 ideas. In order for Mashiach to come, there has to be a rise in consciousness. It's called Moichin in Kabbalah. There has to be a rise in consciousness of Ruchnius, and that will happen. It will be V'eshboich Ruchi al Kol Basar, and that's miraculous. And the Mashiach will be able to pull it off. But in order for that to happen, there has to be a climate of peace and prosperity and tranquility. Enter Trump. Trump will create, because Trump is America, the leader of the world, and he's going to straighten out a lot of the world, believe me. When he gets finished with Iran and the Arabs, as things go on, he's going to confront every nation. Yeah, okay, you got to pay for this, and you got to pay for that. He's even got the Mexican president, Nieto, running with his tail between his legs, right? Because he's going to force him to pay the wall. This man doesn't take nonsense from anybody. So he's going to create an unusual tranquility and peace and prosperity. And that is a climate that the Mashiach can come. The Mashiach is not going to come in a climate of persecutions, which was always what happened in the history of the Jews. No. Why? Because it says a posik. It says, Berega kotten in the Novi, Berega kotten azavtich. I will do what? I will abandon you for what? For 1 minute? That's it. But but I will gather you in unbelievable mercy. What does that mean? That means the last end will not be like all the other persecutions. There will be a tremendous menucha, and Klal Yisrael will grow. And there are many rise for this, which I can't bring down because there's too many details. But the end of time will not be the heat or the tragedy of confrontation was absorbed by the Holocaust, which is World War II, and by World War I. This one won't come like that, because God will bring the Mashiach with unbelievable rachamim gedolim, with unbelievable mercy. What is that mercy? That will not come to Yisurim, and therefore America, which is Esau, has to be tohom. He has to change from Yaved to Yavoid. This is what we're looking at. The whole thing is an unbelievableness. That's what's happening. You can't be naive. You have to realize what is going on. But once you understand what the Chumash says, that Trump is nothing more than a messianic figure, and he is. A Mashiach, he's not Mashiach, even though the gematria of Donald Trump in Hebrew, by the way, is gematria Mashiach ben David, if you know that. But of course he's not. But he is part of the messianic process to bring the hachana for the Mashiach. And that's what the Jews need. We need to have hachana. So in the climate of peace and prosperity, there will come a miraculous thing. We don't even know how. But the Mashiach himself will come. And by the way, the Mashiach probably exists now. And he's paralyzed, not physically, because that's part of the deal that he made with God to save the Jews, without getting into that. And therefore, what will happen is he will be released. We are in the Aschanta de Geula. That's where we are. Because the only way Trump can ever become president, the only way America can ever change, is if we have begun the beginning of redemption. It's not the Yemos HaMashiach, it's not the Messianic era, no. But it is the beginning of a true turnaround, where the Tikkun process very likely is complete. And now the last stage to prepare the entry of Mashiach has begun. And this is the concept of Trump. The Mashiach will be released from his prison. And that's really what, like Yosef, the forerunner of Mashiach ben Yosef is Yosef. Remember when Yosef said to his brothers, Ani Yosef, I am Yosef, and they were stunned. That's what's going to happen with this man. He'll be released, he'll grow, and together with him will also grow the whole concept of Klal Yisrael. This is what is going to happen. A tremendous rise in Ruchnius of Klal Yisrael. It's interesting. The word Jerusalem, how do you spell that? J-E-R-U-S-A-L-E-M. Did you notice I stressed USA? Right? In the middle of Jerusalem is USA. That's interesting. Because part of the Tikkun process is the USA. It's Trump. It's the Har of Edom. And not only that, you got a kick out of that. You got a kick out of the American flag. The American flag has 13 what? Stripes. They think it's the 13 original colonies, but we know it's the 13 tribes, right? Because Yosef, right? And the color of the American flag is what? Red, white, and blue. White and blue is the colors of the American flag, right? And red is Esau, isn't it? And of course there are 50 stars, and those are the Nun Shari Bina, right? And they will shine. America is going to assist Klal Yisrael. Now, I realize that what I've told you is radical, but that's fine. I'm okay. I am not politically correct. But we are going to face an incredible tekufah, and that is what's happening. There are many things I left out, enormous amount of details. You can get it on YouTube or the website or other websites and so on and so forth. You know, like I said, the 15 tapes of this stuff is 25 hours. But I just made a summary of this, which is 4.5 hours. Rahmanas. But anyway, I just made, which is also now available on YouTube and so on. But in any case, we are about to experience an unbelievable revolution. And that's really what Trump is. It's a revolution. It's unheard of in the annals of U.S. history. And the good news for us is not just Trump as president. Nah. The real good news is that we have now turned the last page where it says conclusion, you see. And that the Mashiach, the Rosh wants to bring the Mashiach. He's got to bring the Mashiach, but we need a hachana. And the hachana is going to be a tremendous tekufah. And that's what you're looking at. There is no other way to explain the change of heart of an American president. All the presidents have been terrible to, from Reagan, where he recognized the PLO, to Bush, first Bush, where he stabbed Israel in the back by canceling the loan guarantees in the Persian Gulf War. And then you had Clinton, who stabbed Israel in the back by allowing Arafat to kill Jews without saying anything to Arafat. How dare you do this, right? And not only that, then you have Bush, the son, which is terrible, because all he did was tell Israel to restrain itself while they were being hammered by missiles. And Obama, of course, he stabbed Israel in the back. Each one of these presidents were punished severely, you should know. And I don't have time to go through it. Therefore, it's amazing to watch an American president put his hand, and not only that, he had his wife there to Mechabed, Netanyahu's wife. You know, I mean, Obama had him come in the back door. You know, it's such a bizoyan, and that's why Bolshevik will destroy him, and so on. But Trump goes out of his way, puts him up in the Blair House. You know, they didn't even charge him, which is astounding to watch. Each one is a nest, you know. But that's what it is. The good news is that we are on the last page, and the Mashiach will be here. And that's the chizik emunah. The Bolshevik has not abandoned us. All I've done is show you that these ideas are miraculous, you see. And therefore the hand of God is with us. He's not abandoned us, on the contrary. The Russian wants to keep what's called a low profile. That's all. That's what he's doing. But it's happening. And therefore, things what you see, they are interpreted in that sense. So let's hope that this year, and by the way, what is the simon of Mashiach ben Yosef? It's an interesting simon, because when Yosef was about to die, he said, Poko Yivkoi, you should remember me. That's the magic two words that Serach Bas Osher said when Moshe Rabbeinu came. But when the Bansham talks to Moshe Rabbeinu by the snap, by the burning bush, he says, what? Pokoi Pokadati. Same word. I have surely remembered the tzoros of Klal Yisrael. It's interesting. And the gematria of Pokoi Pokadati, 778. Just put a 5. 5,778 is Pokoi Pokadati. Alavai, it should come then.
Amen.
Anyway, main idea, do mitzvahs, do tshuva. Remember ruchnius. Make that a priority. You see, because you do not want to be saying to yourself, you know, there was a Rabbi Kessin that said something, that the Mashiach is coming and I should focus on spirituality. Why didn't I take his advice? Thank you. Any questions? Any questions? Yes.
There are two.
Say it loud.
Okay, there are two possible stymies in the Trump plan potentially. I've heard one is this guy Bannon, who sounds like he could be Haman, and
Oh, wow.
yeah, and Putin, who even though he loves Jews, it seems like Trump is not really engaging with him. So
Don't be fooled.
What's the sod? What's the sod there?
You know, if I told you the gematria of Vladimir Putin with a base, not a vav, is also gematria Mashiach ben David. Wouldn't that be interesting? And it is. Putin, you should know, is a miracle. Russia always killed Jews. Always. For hundreds of years. Why would the Russian put in somebody who likes Jews? I don't want to go to why. He had a judo teacher that befriended him who was Jewish.
Yes.
He had a teacher, a kindergarten, you know, and none of that he had, because Putin, when he grew up in the old Leningrad, St. Petersburg, he was a wayward youth. His parents basically ignored him. That was the problem. So he was a wild guy. So somebody was makar of him, which is interesting. Some Talmudists. So this guy used to learn all day Gemara in his house in St. Petersburg. And Putin was like 15 years old. And he used to befriend him and have Putin come over and spend time in the house. And Putin never forgot that, you see. In fact, let me read you something. You ready? It's always good to be prepared. Listen to this. Putin is an Oyev Yisrael. One, just like Trump. And what they have to do is they will get together and withstand the entire world to protect the Jews. Listen to this. According to a report in the Israeli Haredi press, Rav Yitzchak Yosef, the Rav Roshi, said, I thought he would shake out. They had a meeting in Moscow with Putin and a whole bunch of Jews together with Putin. Okay, I thought he would shake our hands and that it would be that would be it. But the meeting lasted for an hour and a quarter. I mean, this is with a man who every prime minister or whatever they call themselves, presidents, kill Jews, right? And this guy's sitting with them for an hour and a half, correct? Now, Rav Yosef quoted Putin as saying, listen to this. This is Putin talking. The Egyptians with the magicians are gone, as are the Greeks with their culture, as are the Romans. The only ones who survived are the Jews. Can you tell me why this is? It's Putin talking. Putin is said to have added, permit me to respond. You survived in the merit of your Torah and your rabbis. Did you ever hear Brezhnev saying that? Khrushchev? Malenkov? Andropov? Chernenko? No. You see? How does a man like this say this? Because the Rebbe Shalom, this is Yad Hashem. The Rebbe Shalom picked a guy after Yeltsin. You have to read his biography. After Yeltsin was overthrown, Yeltsin, because he was going to be indicted, because Yeltsin was a crook, okay? And he was going to be indicted. So Putin worked for him. It was whatever he did, you know? So Yeltsin knew that Putin was devoted to him. So what he did is he said, okay, I'm going to make you president, so you won't indict me. Meanwhile, the Russian arranged it where Putin becomes the head of the Soviet Union by this twist of supposed fate, right? And Putin becomes an Oiv Israel. It's astounding. When Putin came to Israel in 2005, you know what he did? You imagine they all threw out the red carpet. I mean, the Soviet Union coming to Israel, right? So of course, like everybody was there, Knesset, you name it, right? So Putin says to them, by the way, I had a teacher, you know, and this was her name. Where is she now? So they looked her up, and she's in Tel Aviv. So he went to visit her. She's 95 years old, an old lady, right? And Putin, the head of Russia, he's got the whole dignitaries of the government with him, is visiting his teacher. So his teacher tells him, you know, I'm 95, and she was very poor, obviously. She said, you know, and she points, she says, look, I live in this hovel, this shack, or whatever, you know? So Putin looked at her. Don't worry. Before Putin left Israel, he bought her an apartment in the richest place in Tel Aviv. Hakar Satoiv. That's what it is. Whoever heard of that in the Soviet Union? You think this is an accident? Putin is there to work with Trump. Why do you think Trump and Putin get along so well? You think it's an accident? Yeah, of course you can explain Al Piteva. Because both of you admire strong leaders. Guys who won't back down and guys who are defiant. They both admire that. But who set them up this way? The Rebbe Shalom. Because he wants them to work together to protect Israel. And I believe what will happen is that I think Putin will go away from Iran and join the U.S. because the U.S. is going to recognize Crimea. The Jews are going to recognize for Putin. They're going to remove the sanctions and they're going to do trade with Putin, which he's going to remove what Iran is not doing. And I believe in the end, Putin and the U.S. will become allies, which is unheard of in history. Think about that. The U.S. and Russia are allies. Why? For the sake of Klal Yisrael. Because you need the two greatest nations in the world to stand up to the UN, Europe, and all the other anti-Semites that want to destroy. And that would be a Nes Nigla before the Great War between the clash of civilizations, which I didn't mention, but it's predicted. There will be a clash of civilizations between Iran and Hezbollah and all these guys, right? And Hamas and so on, right? Between Israel and them. And you will have these two nations that are going to protect. And this is all part of the Messianic process. Okay, anybody else?
Bannon? How about Bannon?
Bannon is not an anti-Semite. That's a tremendous mistake. He is not an anti-Semite. I spoke to somebody who was a very close person to Bannon, and he said that's ridiculous. Bannon loves Israel. Bannon is an extreme right, and so is Netanyahu. And most of Israel is right. Forget about the left. and so on. No, he's not. That's a tremendous mistake. Your problem is you believe the media. That's why. Don't believe them. It's called fake news. Yeah.
How do you see Zechariah Perek Yudalad in this whole scenario?
What about, what does it say?
Well, armies coming in and ravaging half the women in Yerushalayim and this whole great war against. How does this fit into your?
Because what the Russian does is very interesting. He can shift dinam. In other words, even if that should have happened, he could do that in some tekufa before that. That's what he did with the Holocaust and World War I. Anybody else?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, go ahead.
Any thoughts on
Loud.
facilitated communications with autistics?
No, I don't buy in that. That's been disproven. That's completely, I don't buy that. Besides, they predicted Mashiach would be here how many years ago?
Last year.
What?
Last year.
Yeah, but last year is last year, right? So much for that. Go ahead.
I was wondering, Donald Trump is very.
By the way, I don't work for Trump.
I know you do.
I don't even think
But
that.
the problem I'm having.
I'm just.
He's not. He puts his heart above his head. If you know what I mean. He's very impulsive.
Wait. I know. I look. He's not perfect. You understand something? Esau isn't perfect. There's only one thing Esau had to do, right? Is to be truthful. That was his job.
That he is. I'll give
There's two things Trump has to do to change the world, right? He can be anything he wants about Taiva. I don't care what he wants, right?
That's
There's only
not
two.
right.
What?
I wasn't going to get into that.
Whatever. The only two things he has to do is one, he has to admit and recognize the truth and defend it, and he has to be defiant of all the enemies that don't want to know the truth. That's it. That is all he has to do to defy the entire world and to say, this is the MS. Everything else is irrelevant.
But how does that relate to Aesop's head? Aesop's head is intellectual. It's
Because
not
the
emotional.
last time I checked, Trump still has a body.
Yeah.
And the
Yes.
body is Esau.
Yes, I understand.
But the head,
That's what's Tahoe.
yeah, that's what's, yeah, exactly. Anybody else? Oh, okay, wow.
Can
Thank you.
we help with the chairs? Put the chairs on the side, please, before